Hey, I'm just an idiot who loves to read books. If you are a reader by any means, please consider subscribing. So I want to do a sort of a public, service for you today. And technically the topic, or at least the goal and the objective of this video will be, why is cultural appropriation such a big deal? Just in the last decade, this topic, this cultural appropriation stuff, whatever you think of it, whether you think it's BS or whether you think it's completely valid, has literally, there's no denying that it has literally skyrocketed. So today I'm trying to really decipher why. And I went into this video trying to sort of educate myself, but also if I find something that I really resonate with, I will share it with you. So let me give you an example, first of all, of what being cancelled for cultural appropriation looks like. So there is an author that you will know 100% if you have read Storm Dancer #2, the Lotus books, any of the Lotus books, or anything by Jay Kristoff. And Jay Kristoff, technically speaking, has been cancelled so much and so hard for cultural appropriation, and he has been, look, here's the thing, right? He has been getting cancelled for cultural appropriation for the last decade. Like, this guy has been getting cancelled for a decade for cultural appropriation. The reviews of his book, The Storm Dancer, every little review mentions how terribly this guy assassinates the culture of the Japanese people. I have read that book and I agree 100%. Is it because I hate the reality that he is white and he's writing about Japanese people? Freaking no. Hell no. The primary reason why I think that book sucks, first of all, it's quite generic, boring. The prose was kind of average. The story, structurally, it's terrible. But finally, which is crucial to this particular video, is that he does Wikipedia research, okay? The extent of his research is Wikipedia. Because you see, I believe, if you're an artist and you're doing writing a story, every aspect of that story has to be well researched. You have to if you don't have an understanding of the topic, I believe that you should do the research. It would make you a proper artist, okay? It has nothing to do with politics. This one is just about art and not proper art, like, doing the work and not doing the work, lazy and someone who is hardworking. So he really absolutely got cancelled for cultural appropriation. I'll actually read you 2 reviews, okay, about the people mentioning this in the reviews. There are so many. You can go to the Goodreads page for Storm Dancer and you will 100% find this, I promise you. So one reviewer goes, "This book is like what would happen if someone went into a Japanese tourist shop and decided to write about the culture based on that." Okay, and that is so true, because a lot of the stuff that is discussed in the story, it's just basic Wikipedia stuff that has no nuance whatsoever. Another one goes, "For a novel which claims to be a Japanese steampunk, and the distinction is important, there is very little authentic Japanese or even Oriental/Asian feel to this story. You can't just fling Japanese words around and market it as a Japanese story. That's not how it works, and it really doesn't work here. This is most obvious in the way the characters interact with each other. There is something distinctly un-Japanese about how they address or relate to one another, and in the actions towards each other. Perhaps it is different for other readers, but I see it very clearly and it bothers me." By the way, if you go and watch my review, I mentioned this particular theme because I happen to have interacted with few, over the years, close friends of mine that we do a lot of projects together. Another reviewer actually, this one is very interesting because it's from someone who is themselves Japanese. They go, "It really sets my teeth on edge when all along this book was heavily marketed as kind of like a book set in some sort of an alternate history version of Japan with an added splash of fantasy and steampunk. Only it's really a Japanese-inspired story set in an alternate world. The Japanese elements of this story are so heavily borrowed to carry a world just like Japan that I am super critical. I didn't know until later, but it really upset me that the extent of the author's research was only via Wikipedia and by watching anime." Really? Absolutely, really? Even When I had essays for my Japanese literature classes, I did extensive research by reading the original source material, looking up the author's ideology and how it showed up in his work, the social and political climate at the time, and even went through books that had critical commentary on the literary movement novels. And that's just an essay. Seriously? Seriously? My culture and heritage is not something you can surface skip, through a 5-minute perusal of links on Wikipedia and splash together and splash something together and say it's a great homage to it. No. So there you go. There are authors who have gotten cancelled. By the way, this is just one example that I can give you. You know this. Literally every other day in Twitter, especially in book Twitter, someone is trending for being cancelled for cultural appropriation. And why is this the case? I have done a bit of thinking, and I want you to go down in the comments below and share your thinking around cultural appropriation, especially in the book world, okay? And so here's my reasoning. So it is important to understand. Let's simulate an example of someone using other people's culture as a marketing gimmick, right? They are using other people's culture so that they can market their own book. What ends up happening in that particular scenario is that the particular individual who is using the other culture as a marketing gimmick, they end up writing a bare minimum, terrible, if at times completely wrong version of that culture, because they are not really here to do the work as a proper artist should. Because you see, I believe, if you're an artist and you're writing a story, every aspect of that story has to be well researched. You have to if you don't have an understanding of the topic, I believe that you should do the research. It would make you a proper artist, okay? It has nothing to do with politics. This one is just about art and not proper art, like, doing the work and not doing the work, lazy and someone who is hardworking, right? So, in further detail, to expand this particular thinking, the person does a terrible job. They depict a culture wrongly, okay? They falsely represent that particular culture. It's like a cultural assassination. What ends up happening is that the next step happens. So bad false representation. Number two, or basically cultural assassination. Number two, this leads to, someone who is, let's say impressionable about that particular culture, who has not really seen that culture. Let's say someone who is an American, you write about Japan, they see that particular culture through your work, right? Or through the particular person who has done a terrible job, their work. Now, the perception of Japanese culture is wrong because their first impression has been through a wrong, depiction by someone who really had nefarious methods or ideas to start with. And this leads to a very troublesome position where this particular person who is very, impressionable learns wrongly about that culture, leading to them having bad ideas about that culture or wrong ideas about that culture. This can lead to the formation, if let's say the particular story becomes very famous, it can lead to the formation of, one more time, it can lead to the formation of stereotypes, okay? These stereotypes are false. They are famous things that are depicted in famous pieces of media and said by famous people, but really they are not true. And so the wrong depiction leads ultimately to just false stereotypes. And these false stereotypes can be used to harm people. And if you really pay attention to anything in the Western world, you will notice that everyone has stereotypes, even white people. There are stereotypes about white people. There are stereotypes about black people. There are stereotypes about the French, the English, the, Scots. Everyone has stereotypes in the West. Everyone has stereotypes in Africa relative to other Africans, right? This is true for every culture. The only difference here is that historically speaking, let's say, you have, stereotypes about black people, right? Black Americans specifically. They have the stereotypes about them have been used to exclude them. So no one really excluded white people, because they love a lot of seasoning, okay? So no one has really used, stereotypes of white people in order to harm them. but people have 100% used stereotypes about Black Americans in order to harm them. Number one, this is true for a lot of other people. So everyone has stereotypes about them. It's just that how those stereotypes are used are not equal from group of people to another group of people. Ultimately, this leads to, this piece that you wrote, this art that you wrote, which was really just not good to start with, ultimately spilling over and contributing to a large festering wound. This wound is a stereotype. These stereotypes are used to harm the group of people that you have depicted, because you keep perpetuating the stereotype. And again, remember, not all different groups of people have the stereotypes used similarly, okay? Some people's stereotypes, it's a fun joke at a party. Other people's stereotypes, it's, you're not getting the job, or, So these things are very crucial because you're a violent, you whatever that is, right? Yeah. So it's important that you do not contribute to the formation of stereotypes. The Mad Queen is here and she's shaking everything up. Anyhow, there you go. That's the primary reason why cultural appropriation has sort of skyrocketed lately, especially in the last decade, because people are down with this shit. They don't want, more stereotypes. They want proper work from proper artists. They don't want charlatans who are just looking for quick money. Further, following this, combine this with, colonialism, right? Because, the history of white people is that, they have exploited other people economically and, culturally, okay? Sorry. They have exploited, a lot of people across the world economically in the past. So if a white author writes about another culture, let's say J. Christoph, and he doesn't really do a good job, I think you can see why people would assume negatively, because they have seen white people exploit their land before. Now comes this white man and he writes a story about your culture, a descendant of the people who have exploited your ancestors physically, and now what he's doing is he's using your culture as a marketing gimmick, but at the same time he is not doing a good job. So you can see how it is really just being deaf. It's like not reading the room, okay? Politically, it's very bad because you are someone who's white and you are exploiting people, and your ancestors have exploited these people, right? And that can further expand this particular problem. So you write a story, it is false, and that falsehood leads to stereotypes. Those stereotypes harm the people, but since you're white, it is made worse by the history of your own ancestors. Are these things because it's BC culture, because it's leftist bullshit? No, these things are real. These things are history. You cannot ignore history no matter how you like it. Facts are facts. It is what it is. So generally speaking, in the last decade, when, people have taken more aware of these things, they have taken efforts in order to come up with language, cultural appropriation, right? Marketing gimmicks and all of that, in order to describe these things, in order to make sure that other people are aware of these things and other people are made aware of them. So that is so far why I think cultural appropriation has really skyrocketed in popularity in the last decade. So I want to ask you a question. First of all, do I think cultural appropriation is bad or good? I think it depends on, who you are talking about. Number two, I need to see whatever work that they did. Number three, I need to talk to a native. So my response would require another video, okay? Hopefully I'll make that video in the future. But I want to ask you the question, what do you think of cultural appropriation? So this whole video has been sort of my reasoning as to why cultural appropriation, it has sort of gained momentum in the last decade. You tell me, what do you think of it? Do you approve of it? Do you not? And so on and so forth, right? What are your thoughts around this topic, right? So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Have a nice day. Bye.